Well, there have been major international developments related to the war between Israel and Hamas. A key vote took place at the United Nations today.
The result of the vote is as follows. In favor, 143. Against, 9. Abstentions, 25.
The United Nations General Assembly has backed the Palestinian bid for full member status. It's a symbolic move. Only the Security Council can decide on membership. Canada was one of 25 countries who abstained. That's a change in stance. Up until now, Canada had voted against full membership for Palestinians at the UN. The Prime Minister explained the change.
So Canada has decided to change our position from no at the UN to abstaining, to reflecting that our long-standing position that you could only recognize the state of Palestine as an outcome at the end of a process leading to a two-state solution, we now recognize that it may happen sooner than at the end of the process as a way of pushing towards that two-state solution.
And in another major development, the Biden administration has sent a report to Congress. It says Israel's use of U.S.-supplied weapons in Gaza has likely violated international law, but that the U.S. cannot verify specific incidents right now, and without those specifics, it cannot justify cutting off military aid. Now, meanwhile, Israel says it is committed to its plan for a ground offensive in Rafah in southern Gaza. The United Nations says some 110,000 people have fled Rafah, but more than 1.4 million remain, and Israel is continuing to bombard the area. The major government hospital in the city was forced to close earlier this week, and doctors at the remaining hospitals say that they are overwhelmed right now. For more on what this vote means, we are joined right now by Michael Lynk. He is the former UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territory and a current Professor Emeritus of Law at Western University. We reach him tonight in London, Ontario. Mr. Lynk, thanks for being here. How significant is this vote and its outcome?
Look, I think it's fairly significant. It winds up elevating the status of Palestine within the UN system from a non-member observer status, which it had in 2012, to now a newly invented position of observer state at the UN. It already had the right to be able to call itself the state of Palestine since 2012, but this gives it, if you like, enhanced rights as observer state at the UN, including the right to be able to submit proposals and amendments, to be able to co-sponsor proposals and amendments, and full and effective participation at UN meetings. But more to the point, on the symbolic level, I think it shows the world's exasperation at what's been going on in the Middle East, not only the 7-month war on Gaza, but also Israel's refusal to want to recognize a Palestinian state. Then this, I think, explains the overwhelming vote that we saw today, that the world is largely on the side of wanting to see a two-state resolution to the conflict in the Middle East.
We just heard from the Prime Minister there about Canada abstaining from voting today, changing its position from no. Walk me through why you think they have this new position now.
It has traditionally voted no. Certainly in 2012, when the last vote took place 13 and a half years ago, when Stephen Harper was in power, Canada was one of 9 states to vote no against elevating Palestine to this non-member observer status. I think the Prime Minister changed the vote today to an abstention, is probably a recognition that it's a long-standing position that it would only recognize Palestine as a state as the outcome of negotiations between Israel and Palestine was not on the table. The current Israeli government has maintained over and over again it will never allow a Palestinian state to come into being. That's contrary to the wall-to-wall support for a two-state solution across the international community. And I think this switch to a abstention position is an indication of Canada's exasperation at Israel's position. My own understanding from what I was told today, in fact, there was a pretty lively debate between the Canadian mission in New York, which was pushing for a yes vote, and the more, I suppose, conservative position being adopted by the Prime Minister's office as to an abstention vote.
Israel has had some strong reactions to this decision. Among them, Israel's UN ambassador said that this move, quote, opened up the United Nations to modern-day Nazis. Is Israel's reputation changing?
Israel's reputation, I think, is sinking quite a bit. Certainly, its conduct of the 7-month war, which is exasperating even its closest ally, the United States, is one major factor in that. But I think probably the quality of its representation at the United Nations is also not helping its reputation at all among other UN members. The Israeli ambassador to the UN today had a small paper shredder with him when he was at the podium of the General Assembly and put the cover of the UN Charter through the paper shredder as he was talking about and criticizing the Assembly for this particular vote. That doesn't win you very many friends at the UN, and we can see that by the fact there are only 8 other countries that voted no to this resolution alongside Israel.
Of course, the Security Council endorsement is really what is needed here. What is today's vote going to mean substantially going forward?
That's interesting that you say that, because one of the provisions in the resolution that was passed today by the General Assembly was asking for the Security Council to reconsider the matter favorably. As we know, I think on the 18th of April, the Security Council debated whether or not to recommend the admission of Palestine as a full state member, and the vote was 12 in favor, 2 abstentions, and 1 vote against. The United States has a veto with respect to that, so the motion was defeated. And then, if it had passed, it would then go to the UN General Assembly, where it would need a 2/3 vote. And we can see today that Palestine would have received a 2/3 vote from the General Assembly to be admitted. So really, the only issue standing between Palestine and admission as a full member of the United Nations is the United States. Interestingly, the United States actually has provisions in its domestic legislation which says that if Palestine achieves recognition of statehood at the United Nations that is opposed by Israel, the United States is to cut off all of its funding to the United Nations. And that probably explains in part the U.S. position.
Certainly does. Okay, Michael, appreciate the time tonight. That is Michael Lynk, who is the former UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territory and currently a Professor Emeritus of Law at Western University, joining us from London, Ontario this evening.